Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the video. This is Pop Culture Philosophers, and it's time for Comics Revisited. Today, we're revisiting Zenith. That's right, everybody. Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. Thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin, Robbie Billups. This is
Brooks.
The magnificent he is, and you're magnificent for checking out this video. Today on Comics Revisited, we're going to be talking about Zenith. Zenith, the 2000 AD serialized comic book written by Grant Morrison with artwork by Steve Yeowell. I absolutely love this book. It's very early Morrison work in a way. This is pre, Arkham Asylum, Animal Man, all that kind of stuff, right? So it was serialized in 2000 AD from 1987 to 1992. They revisited it a couple of times as we are right now. At the time, 2000 AD was trying to shake some things up, do some different type stuff, including their very first ever superhero. So even though they had great immortal strips like Judge Dredd, they've never had a superhero book until Zenith. And Zenith is not your typical superhero, right? So he doesn't really take his job very seriously. He's very vain. He's very much a product of Generation X.
I wouldn't call him a superhero, really. He's just a guy with powers.
He's just a guy with superpowers.
He doesn't go out and say, he doesn't, he's not a crime fighter.
Yeah.
He only fights to save the world when he's kind of forced into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's a really interesting take on the superhero that 2000 AD did, of course, by way of Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison had done a little bit of work here and there, some indie type stuff, right? And then he got this gig. Steve Yeowell came in as the artist, and he did 4 phases of this book that went over several years for 2000 AD. It became one of their most popular scripts at the time, and I absolutely love this book, Brooks. Overall, what do you think about it? Because it's early Morrison, and it's got a lot of future Morrison-isms in it. Yeah. And you can definitely see where he's going. But what do you think about it?
Well, it's the most, straightforward Morrison story I've ever read.
Okay.
It's not as, he doesn't. It's not as weird, I guess.
Okay.
as some of his later works.
Okay, I gotcha.
It's a pretty straightforward superhero story with kind of the twist of he's kind of a slacker and he's not really interested in being a hero. He doesn't have heroic qualities.
Yeah.
He just has powers, pretty much.
Yeah, it was kind of a response almost to things like Dark Knight Returns and the Watchmen. Superheroes were becoming they were coming to be taken very seriously, very dark and gritty. And Grant Morrison wanted to go against that grain and have a superhero who was the exact opposite of Batman from Dark Knight Returns, and that's Zenith, right? He's a Gen Xer. He fits in his generation. Morrison threw a little bit of a critique at the Conservative Party at the UK at the time, stuff like that in there. So he takes his jabs, he has his themes, he does his thing. But what's really interesting to me about this book is that even though it's not as crazy weird as some Morrison stuff will eventually get in his tenure as a writer in the comic book industry, it definitely has some of the start of some of that stuff. The many angled ones, the Loiger, all that idea, other dimensions, the multiverse series.
Yeah, giant crises where different realities have to come together.
Crises, one would say. But yeah, absolutely, all that stuff, right? You can tell that he's made to do this stuff. He has an interest in superhero comics from America, and I think that was one of the most unique things that British readers got when they first got introduced to Zenith was the concept and scope of these stories, right? And this harkens back to the Silver Age of American comics and stuff like that. Grant Morrison obviously loves that stuff. He would take this idea and fuel it into books like Justice League of America, his JLA run, which we just recently covered here on Comics Revisited, me and Jelani. Batman Incorporated, all these things that he's done. Multiversity. There are scenes in Phase 3 of Zenith that remind me straight up from Multiversity, And they remind me of Crisis on Infinite Earths, things like that. So if you like that stuff, you'll definitely like Zenith. But all in all, it is a story about this dude who he's got superpowers. He's the last hero at the time that the book starts in Phase 1 that's known to the Earth, and he's using that fame and that stardom to be a pop star.
Yeah.
So he's a pop star. He's got an agent. He cares about his image. He does not care so much about saving the day or the little man or stopping bullies or any typical, prototypical idea about what a hero is, a superhero. Zenith's not that. Zenith is probably more like the people that read Zenith at the time. You know, just being like, I'm just a regular dude.
It's like, if I had powers, let's have a band.
I think what Morrison wants to do is he wants to be like, how do we make heroes real without tearing them down like they do in Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns, right? And so he's like, let's just make him a regular Gen Xer, you know? And Morrison was into music. He was trying to make a music career out of his life before he turned over to comic completely. So I'm sure that influenced him just a little bit. But like, I love how no matter what the big giant thing that's going on in Zenith, at all times the character is the exact same. He's the same pitch. He only cares about himself. He's just kind of a slacker. He's a typical Gen X idea. You know what I'm saying? The archetype of Generation X in a way. But I love it. Phase 1 basically deals with the idea that there's a mystery about his past. In this world, there were heroes. They were kind of genetically engineered and modified, right? They were turned into this army called Cloud9, but they all revolted against the government and became hippies, basically. Zenith's parents were 2 of them. They found out that they were made sterile so they wouldn't be able to reproduce because the government didn't want the danger of superhumans reproducing and taking over the world. But the doctor that's in charge of this, Dr. Payne, maybe that's his idea all along, right? So Zenith is the product of 2 of these people. Everybody is either depowered or presumed dead and missing. His parents are dead. He doesn't know much about his history or anything like that. He was born with these powers. He's chasing fame, and the big thrust of the plot in Phase 1 is about the Master Man, who's like a clone of this like German, Nazi Germany, like Superman idea, right? Yeah. But this being from another dimension, a higher dimension called the Loiger, right? This dude one of them has taken over this Master Man. And so they have the fight, so we get introduced to the Loiger, we get introduced to the idea of other dimensions, and the superhero team, and Zenith's past, and his mystery. What do you think about Phase 1?
I liked it. It's a good setup, you know, and, you know, the whole thing with, was it Maxi Man?
Yeah, Maxi Man, that's what it is, yeah.
Master Man. Kind of felt like, you know, like an old Captain America, you know, like those early days comics where it was all about, you know, the war and, you know, fighting the Nazis and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like it, you know, that's where most superheroes kind of start from.
Yeah, right? And what's really interesting about Phase 1 to me, Brooks, is that it starts out and you're like, okay, this is good, it's simple, it's nice, it's fine, right? And it is kind of simple, especially compared to what's coming. The artwork's fine and all that stuff, but you're reading it and you're like, well, Zenith is just kind of a dickbag, right? So you're assuming that he's going to grow as a character. That doesn't happen. Phase 2 is basically about this media tycoon teaming up with this Dr. Payne dude, and they want to first of all, like, he finds out the mystery of his parents, but it's this media tycoon and this Dr. Payne. The media tycoon guy is kind of crazy. He's going to send these, like, nuclear warheads to London, and so there's this whole bomb threat that's going on. Zenith has to stop it. He's kind of invested in this, but only so much.
Yeah. Well, even the reason he's invested is selfish because, you know, he's promised information on his parents.
Yes, exactly, right? He gets that information. Basically, his mom died, was murdered, and his dad almost died, and now he's part of this like robot body he has to fight and kill. Yeah. That's kind of tragic. That's probably the most deep and nuanced character development you get from Zenith in the entire...
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
But it's a great moment. It's really fun.
Seems like about the only time he really gives a shit about anything.
Yeah. You also find out more about Cloud9, their history. Some of those characters are still alive. The characters that we found out were still alive in Phase 1. We obviously now know that they have powers, including Peter St. John or whatever, the shaman.
Mandala.
Yeah, and the mandala. And the mandala?
Yeah, I don't know how it's
something like that, right? It's the Mandela effect. I don't know. And then Ruby, is that her name? Like Ruby one of the other? Yeah, you know, and all that stuff. So that's going on. You got the bombs over London. You got Dr. Payne involved. Then they introduced the Chimera, which is a superhero composed entirely of thought and winds up becoming this pyramid crystal. That becomes important later on. Yeah. Right? Phase 3, my favorite. It's basically Crisis on Multiple Zeniths. Right? It's the big, giant crisis thing. Everything they've been building up to with the Loiger, these many-angled, multi-dimensional demonic, evil entities or whatever, right? They're waiting for this alignment, and I love this idea. This alignment of the multiverse into this perfect geometrical structure called the omnihedron. Right? And when this alignment happens, they're going to be able to ascend up and through the entire multiversal life chain, right? In a way, to the top, to the Godhead, and become the force that moves everything and literally be able to control and change reality. What is that not a Morrison enough concept for you?
I think the third one is when he starts feeling more of the Morrison that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I really love the idea, and it's just this big crossover. We're introduced into an alternate reality version of Zenith named Vertex, and he's a really good guy.
He's like Zenith if he actually was a hero.
Yes. So at the end of the book, you think that Zenith has sacrificed himself, and they even talk about how
I knew it the whole time that was the other one. Like, man, they believe that Zenith is going to do that.
Yeah, you think
it's obviously the other guy.
You think Zenith sacrifices himself, but it turns out to be Vertex, and Zenith has been hiding out the whole time.
Like, Zenith did, like, almost nothing, really.
But they lead you into believing that he's going to be a big deal, because they're like, the point that they got to reach is the Zenith, and he's like, oh, I don't like that idea. But his whole attitude towards his alternate duplicate was so funny. The other Vertex just wanted to hang out with him and chat. And he was just kept avoiding him. I would avoid another reality version of myself too, Brooks, wouldn't you?
Probably, yeah.
I know you would avoid an alternate reality version of me.
yeah, that's safe to say.
Yeah, that's safe to say. No, like, I wouldn't want to have a chat with a me from another
I couldn't stand
reality.
Like someone talking at me with my own voice.
Yeah, no,
that'd be like I can't
too
do
much,
it.
too much.
I can't do it, man.
Too much. In Phase 4, after the Loiger get defeated, and back to Phase 3 real quick, one of my favorite things is they get manipulated to making these giant teams out of all these different heroes from other universes.
And there's like the punk robot guy.
Yeah, man, I love him. The acid rock. Yeah, but like, yeah.
Like a lot of them end up being musicians. I can't remember.
They're all so funny, just weird, random characters, and Grant just kind of throws them in there, and they're rendered very well by Yeowell. It works so well. But in Phase 3, they get manipulated into destroying two of these planets. 2 planets, right? In like a Jonathan Hickman New Avengers Incursion type way, almost, right? To destabilize the structure of the Omnihedron. But in fact, they're misled to do this, and they actually perfect the crystalline structure of the multiverse. And I just love that. Like, it's so hopeful. I mean, so like all the hope is there, and then it gets crushed. And then Zenith sacrifices himself, but he doesn't, because it's Vertex, right? In Phase 4, the remaining heroes alive on Earth enact the plan, something they've been building up to this whole time. They basically enact martial law. Like, they take over. They're like, we're going to take over. At first, they're kind of cool about it. They're like, we're going to change some things, but y'all can be down with it. Then they try to kill him. So then they just take over, and it's a very dark, apocalyptic, dystopian future for Zenith. It doesn't end well. He dies. Yeah. Like, his agent died. Like, everybody gets so effed in this book. I love Phase 4. It's so dark. What do you think about Phase 4?
I liked it. I thought it was a good, wrap up to the story.
Yeah.
And it's hard to stick a landing on a story sometimes, like a lot of stories are kind of ruined by the ending.
Yeah.
But I think Zenith pulled it off pretty well.
The best thing about it is it gets into this big, dark, dystopian ending, and then they pull a reversal, and you find out that they actually defeated the bad guys initially, threw them into that Chimera crystal that we were talking about from Phase 2, and so all this Phase 4 that you're watching and that you're reading, that you're experiencing, is in actuality just this reality in this stone, and the real world's fine, and Zenith learns nothing and continues on being a douchebag for the rest of his life. That's Zenith in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
I really like it. The ending does get a little weak. Here's something that's interesting that happened. Morrison started this in 87, 88. In 88, 89 is when he got brought on to DC to do books like Animal Man, Arkham Asylum, Doom Patrol. So he was already rising at DC with mainstream American superheroes as he was still doing Zenith. Kind of off and on, right? Yeah. So I think he's even said that he kind of lost a little bit of the plot at some points, but I think he still thinks that Phase 3 is the strongest, which I do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Phase 3 is my favorite. Why is it your favorite? What about it?
It's just because it's like, so epic.
Yeah.
Like there's so much at stake, and Zenith still just doesn't seem to give a shit.
Yeah, right?
He like goes off and gets drunk, and like you just don't see him hardly.
I know, right? I just like, some people would read this and they would be like, when you do read it, you're kind of like, Zenith is a jerk. Why am I following this guy? And then when you add in the idea that Morrison's trying to take the hero, make it real, but make it not so It's not. This is a dark take on a superhero too.
Grim dark.
You know, and it's an exposure of the 1980s culture. You know what I'm saying? You know, stuff like that, right? So the artwork by Steve Yeowell is fantastic. Steve Yeowell eventually came in and did some of the first bits of the Invisibles with Grant Morrison, and a lot of the ideas that get really built up into the Invisibles kind of do start here at Zenith. You know, you can definitely tell Morrison's influences, the influences of Chaos Magic, the influences of old school DC Silver Age comic books. You can see that, you can feel that, right? Steve Yeowell's artwork is absolutely fantastic. At times, because it's black and white, sometimes in the action scenes, it gets a little muddy for me. And it's a little bit hard for me to figure it out, but I still, even though it may take a little bit of extra work on a couple pages here and there, it works all in all for me. I think it's very grounded and very realistic, and I really like the heavy use of blacks, but mostly the bright spots in the artwork. What do you think about the artwork?
I like the artwork a lot. You know, it is very 2000 AD,
yes,
90s, you know, black and white type art. Like I could see like this guy doing like Judge Dredd or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean Steve Yeowell I think is still one of the most popular artists from 2000 AD. I think he's done so many different strips in that magazine, though, which is still lasting today. UK Comics is a whole different beast, and it's an exceptionally awesome beast, in my opinion, you know? Some of my favorite Alan Moore work, I love The Ballad of Halo Jones, DR and Quench, that comes from 2000 AD. All that Garth Ennis, Judge Dredd stuff is fantastic. You know, the Alan Wagner, I think, did some stuff, too, and I just love 2000 AD. Did you ever used to like read some like old school stuff?
I've read some of the Garth Ennis Judge Dredd.
Yeah,
but like
never the Judge Dredd though.
I haven't like extensively read like a lot of Judge Dredd or anything from 2000.
Yeah, they need to get more available collections in America. That was really cool when they came out with these 4 hardcovers for each phase of the Zenith saga, 3 being the biggest because it's the best one. So all 4 are now available in trade, and it was very hard to get all of these in print for a long time in America because they did publish them, but only up through like phase 1 and 2, maybe 3. But 4 was left unpublished for a long time in America, outside of the 2000 AD comics. So I'm really happy that we have these hardcovers now. It makes a great reading experience. One thing I love about the artwork and the style of the book is it's in 2000 AD, so they're all like what, like 8, 9-page chapters or something?
There's a few pages.
Yeah, it's really quick to get into it. Being they really it makes the book be very effectual, you know, and that's something that I'm planning on taking into some of our projects is the idea that we do it in a very limited space so we don't have any space to waste. Do you know what I'm saying? And there is no wasted space in Zenith, even though Zenith himself is wasted space in a way, right? Some of the themes, like we were talking about, is a response to heroes like Dark Knight Returns, The Watchmen, even things like Squadron Supreme, heroes being real. But if they're going to be real, do they have to be so broken? Do they have to be so dark, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the Ultimates. Like back when the Ultimates first started.
Yeah.
Like I really loved it, but like going back on it, it's like, man, why'd they have to make everybody so fucked up?
Right. You know, and as messed up as Zenith is, he's not that messed up.
Yeah, I mean
he's a typical pop star.
Yeah.
And another thing that this is the commentary on celebrity culture of the 80s. We were really starting, and this has been happening, especially in American culture, and surely in the UK as well, is that this obsession with the pop star, with the celebrity. You know, like even in America, we're obsessed with the royal family. For some reason, you know what I'm saying? So like this idea of the paparazzi, this idea of fame, of what fame actually is and how it can affect someone, that's something that gets taken on here. It's mostly in a way to me though about the cultural differences between generations. Yeah. That's expressed in The Agent.
Yeah, I think he's my favorite. I think he's my favorite character is The Agent.
Yeah.
Because he's just like he's like, you know, maybe you should go save the universe, Zenith. You know, it'd look good. It'd make you look good.
It'd make you look good. We'd sell some albums. You know, because, and you see the dips in Zenith's career. You know, and another cool thing about Zenith is his powers are tied to his biorhythm.
Yeah.
But that never really comes into play.
Well, it does like in the first one because they try to use it as his weakness, but it turns out
they miscalculate.
He gave Elvis his birthday.
So him being a liar saved his life, you know? But it never really comes into a point of, oh man, like, it very much goes against the grain of a typical superhero, you know, and I think that's what Morrison's doing, and that's what he wanted to bring into 2000 AD. That's what he wanted to make his first superhero statement as, and then he went against that and went back into just superhero stuff with Animal Man, Doom Patrol, then JLA. You know what I'm saying? And then other ideas got expressed through other books like The Invisibles and The Filth and outward and such like that. It's also a critique of the Conservative Party in the UK at the time, Thatcherism, all that stuff, right? You feel that in there. And it's not as heavy as V for Vendetta, but it's in there.
Yeah. Well, like, that's a big thing in, especially like a lot of British literature. I've noticed like the whole conservative movement with Thatcher and all that is like it's kind of like, it's set a lot of people off, I think,
Yeah, it really led to a bunch of stuff. In
a way, like, kind of like now with the whole Trump thing. It's kind of like that.
And Brexit.
There's like, because people are so divided, there's like these people that the pro-Thatchers and the anti-Thatchers, and like there's no middle ground, Yeah. It's kind of like that.
So it's a good way to look at books like Zenith, books like V for Vendetta, from those British creators of the time, and really kind of be like, let's think about this, y'all. We don't need to be so divisive. We need to find a little bit more middle ground.
Or at least, learn to tolerate people's opinions that aren't your own.
Or just be like Zenith. Zenith doesn't care.
Like what happened to being, it's like being tolerant has become like something like uncool, I guess. Like you always have to fucking, have a problem with something.
Brooks sounding off here on Comics Revisited. The importance of this book, aside from all what those themes we were talking about, this made Grant Morrison's this started his career, really. This is work that got him noticed by Karen Berger and brought him over to do books like Animal Man and Doom Patrol and Arkham Asylum and The Invisibles and JLA and Batman and Final Crisis and so much work, like so much influential superhero work, especially over at DC Comics, and then even a groundbreaking run on X-Men that they're dealing with right now. Hickman obviously has read that Morrison run, and it was, like I said, the response to Dark Heroes. There was a moment post-Watchmen, post-Dark Knight Returns, where heroes were getting a little too dark. And that led to stuff like X-Force and the extreme nature of like early Image in the 90s and Wildcats and all that stuff, right?
Youngblood.
And as much as we may love some of that stuff, it got a little obnoxious of its time. So it was nice to have something like Zenith that was bouncing back off of that. It was still being obnoxious, but in a different way, in a lighter way, showing that it's all two sides of the same coin, right? And I really, really like that. Zenith, all in all, is something I really highly encourage you to read if you are a Grant Morrison fan, if you're a Grant Morrison superhero fan, if you just like fun British comic books, stuff like that. Something a little bit different, a little bit more unique, something against the grain from what you're typically used to with a superhero. Read the Zenith stuff. Really fun. Wait till you get to phase 3. It's the best. What do you think? Final thoughts on Zenith?
I definitely recommend it. Like, especially if you're a fan of Morrison's work.
Yeah.
It's a good, it's kind of a good peek at like his early mindset, when you like when you're getting to a writer, you want to see how they started out.
Yeah.
Like when you start reading Stephen King, like you gotta read Carrie, and then like, it's just a, way to
trace the history of their thoughts and how they evolved as a creator. Absolutely. And you can see those evolutions start.
Yeah. I think by the end of this book, he kind of was getting to where, more recognizable.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't quite there, but he was inching that way.
And Phase 4 is in color, and I love the colors in it. And some bits in Phase 1 are color. The colored bit page with the giant eyes and that's one of my favorite bits. One of my favorite moments in Zenith. Anyway, we highly recommend it. Let us know what you think of Zenith in the comments down below. And join us very, very soon. That's right, next week for a new Comics Revisited, where we're going to be revisiting another classic comic book that we think you should read. So thank you so much for checking out the video. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Join us over at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts and a whole lot more. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. This has been
Brooks,
the Magnificent. Thanks for joining the PCP Army. Kramer.